experience, offering your critique and some modest suggestions. Jeff Holman.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. Before I officially begin my speech, I wanted to mention something to our guests tonight. You may not have a very good idea what I'm talking about when I talk about pathways. I think throughout the speech, you'll get some insight into it. It's basically a framework that we use that helps us give our speeches and improves our skills. For a lot of people, it's working really well. I'm going to take an unflinchingly critical look at the program tonight. One of the things about our group is that we tend not to shy away from controversy and tend to hold different opinions. And with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and give my speech. The Pathways Learning Experience. It's an exciting, flexible, and interactive way to embark on a personal and professional journey of development. That's what it says on the Toastmasters International website, and I'm sure for a lot of people, that's true. But that's not to say the program couldn't be improved. And so tonight, I'm going to take a critical look and suggest some ways that we might be able to tweak it to have it serve us even better. I've been on my own journey for the past year to find out how Toastmaster clubs are doing and how they're faring under this program and how some individual Toastmasters feel about it. In fact, I've visited 14 clubs at least once. I've talked about pathways with dozens of individual members, and I also have my own experience with pathways as a member of this club and currently a couple of others. Finally, I've researched what other Toastmasters are saying about pathways online. What I've learned has got me a little concerned. Pathways has some problems. The program has improved a lot since it was rolled out several years ago, but there are still some issues. I'm going to talk about those issues and suggest some possible solutions. But first, I want to make one thing clear. I'm not suggesting that we should abandon pathways. The way I look at it, if you're going to be a Dairy Queen, you're going to serve dilly bars. If you're going to be a Toastmasters club, you're going to interface with pathways. We depend on the Toastmasters brand. People understand, or at least have an idea what Toastmasters is. It's been around for a long time. So leaving isn't really an option. It'd be easier, I think, to start your own soft serve ice cream store. What I am suggesting is that we take a good look at the program, identify what the problems are, work around them when we can, and continue to urge Toastmasters International to tweak them a bit. Let's start with the Pathways Online interface. I've been designing websites since 1996 when I started my own web development business. I went on to serve as webmaster for a local TV station and a state of Minnesota agency. When I saw Pathways in its Basecamp interface for the first time, I was concerned. I'm not the only one who has some doubts and questions. In checking what other Toastmasters are saying online, I've come across a lot of comments, some from Toastmaster presidents and vice presidents charged with implementing it. Some have expressed the point of view that it's awfully difficult to navigate. Others have wondered or wished that it could be a little easier to follow. They're concerned that some people aren't able to pursue the program as well as the Toastmasters originally intended. Now, the interface has been improved since it was first rolled out. But still, it's not intuitive, navigation is confusing, and links don't always work as expected. There is also a matter of some possible legal and ethical questions. There's something called Section 508. It's a series of web content accessibility guidelines. Courts have held that websites that aren't accessible to the sight impaired or those who might have other disabilities could be in violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. One of the things about Basecamp is that it relies a lot on pop-up windows. These can be confusing and behave unpredictably for lots of web users, but especially for those with disabilities. In fact, they really shouldn't be used, according to accessibility experts, except in extreme cases. The Pathways website acknowledges the problem and says that, well, Basecamp is not fully accessible. In 2021, 40 years after the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act, I think we need to do better. But it isn't just people with disabilities who might be a little frustrated from time to time. In the US as of 2020, Chrome is the most popular web browser. However, more than 38% of all web users use Safari. The people behind Basecamp say that it's not supported and suggest you use another browser if you have problems. Now, is it a good idea to design a website that's not going to work very well for 38% of web users? I have some questions about that. But enough about Basecamp. I think there's a more fundamental problem with Pathways that we need to give some thought to as we move forward. Now, a little history. Toastmasters began in 1905 as a series of speaking clubs organized by a fellow named Ralph Smedley, and he was working for the time at the YMCA. He had a unique vision, which places the needs of the individual above those of the organization. He believed strongly that formal courses shouldn't be offered in a Toastmasters club, although he felt it was necessary to prepare certain materials to give guidance he thought clubs needed. But he warned that if we relied too much on courses and structures and lost the personal touch, in Hurd's words, we could easily become just another high-grade correspondence school. It's this vision that we need to think about as Toastmasters clubs struggle to implement the Pathways learning experience and its 11 paths and competencies and 5 levels and all those elective and required courses. Another Toastmaster summed up the problem better than I can. It feels like Toastmasters is becoming more about working on paths and achieving badges and awards and a little less about going to a club and learning from others. It's clear to me from visiting 14 clubs that at least some members aren't buying the Pathways program as it's presently being offered. I was at a Zoom meeting for one Toastmasters club. There were more than a dozen members present. The vice president asked, "Who wants to give a speech next week?" There weren't any volunteers. That same week, I visited another club where nobody had a speech ready for that meeting. They did table topics and they adjourned early. Now, I'm sure that the pandemic and the inability to meet in person has affected clubs and every other organization. Attendance may be down and people may have less time to put together speeches for whatever reason. But for clubs I visited, there were issues in membership and people giving speeches had declined before the pandemic. That's not just true in the United States. There's a video on YouTube I happened to stumble across a while ago. It was created by a Toastmaster who belongs to a club in the Ukraine. His name is Graham Siebert. Pathways isn't all that popular in the Ukraine either. His club has 25 members. He's advanced a few levels, but nobody else in his club had got beyond level 1. In his video, he laments that Toastmasters had been a central part of his life for the past decade, but he's uncomfortable that the program has changed in such a way that raises some serious questions for him. His main objection is one that I happen to share. He notes that for more than 100 years, Toastmasters help people learn how to give a speech. But in Pathways, for the first time, as he puts it, instead of teaching people how to deliver a speech to express their own ideas, Toastmasters, in some cases, now tells people what to talk about. Now, I've chosen the presentation mystery path, but I wonder if I'm going to be able to really complete that path. There are several required speeches that I'm going to have a little problem giving. The topics, frankly, don't interest me. And in some cases, I have a little question about the ideas behind those topics. There are some other speeches I could give, but not quite in the manner I'd like to, because the project seemed to me a little arbitrary, along with the rules that apply to them. Let's take one, for example, creating effective visual aids. Pathways says a member must use a minimum of 1, but not more than 3 visuals. Suppose I want to give a speech with visuals about the changing seasons. There are 4 of them. Or maybe I'd like to use visuals in my speech about nutrition. There are 4 basic food groups. There is also my favorite rock group, the Fab Four. I'm not going to talk about them. And I wouldn't even think about attempting this assignment with a speech about the Great Lakes. There are 5 of them. Now, I assume nobody here would complain if I broke the rules and showed images of all 5 beautiful Great Lakes. But I give these examples to highlight what is sometimes the arbitrariness of the Pathways program. It may sound like I'm making a mountain out of a molehill here, but the problem is Pathways has a lot of molehills. Where do we go from here? Well, in response to feedback from members, Pathways has revised some aspects of the program. Since September 2019, members have been allowed to access any project at any level right away. Initially, we weren't allowed to view the next project on a path without completing the previous one. As I understand it, we can now complete projects in the order of our choice. Though Pathways, like a disapproving school mom who knows what's best for her charges, discourages this. We must ask Toastmasters International to do more, to fix the website so it's accessible to people with disabilities and works better for everyone else, to revise the program itself so that no one feels compelled to give a speech about something they just might not be interested in. Help me communicate better. That's what you promised. Don't tell me what to talk about. As a club, we should remind ourselves that we're here to serve the needs of individuals who want to become better speakers, and that individuals learn in different ways, and we all have different needs. We should remember that badges and awards may be a nice form of recognition, but they're not why we exist. Finally, we should welcome anyone who wants to improve their speaking, communication, and leadership skills. They might find some of the exercises and Pathways truly helpful, but a non-manual speech on a topic not dictated by Pathways should be as welcome as any other speech. We should be respectful and encouraging to those who want to find their own path, whether or not it fits into the predefined projects in the Pathways program. Mr. Toastmaster.